It was 2017, the year Hurricane Irma hit Florida. I remember that week like it was yesterday. The air felt heavy, the sky looked strange, and everyone in our neighborhood was rushing to prepare. Stores were out of bottled water, gas stations were empty, and people were boarding up their windows. Still, none of us truly believed how bad it was going to get. I had lived in that community for 5 years. It was a quiet, gated neighborhood, the kind you think will keep you safe. Nice lawns, white fences, and an HOA that liked everything picture perfect. Too perfect sometimes. They fined people if their grass grew too long or if a paint shade wasn't exactly the approved tone. But I never thought that same HOA would make my life a nightmare when I needed help the most. The night the hurricane came, it felt like the sky broke open. The wind howled so loud it drowned out every other sound. My wife was holding our two kids in the hallway, the only place without windows, while I tried to keep the front door from flying off its hinges. I could hear things breaking outside. Glass, metal, who knows what. Every few seconds, the power flickered and then finally went out completely. The whole neighborhood went dark. Hours passed like that. Just wind, rain, and fear. At one point, something slammed into our garage door so hard that it bent inward. I still remember the noise, a deep metal crack that made my heart drop. When the storm finally started to calm down early in the morning, I went outside and froze. My yard was unrecognizable. The fence was gone, ripped out like paper. The lawn was covered with branches, debris, and someone else's trash cans. My garage door was caved in. The roof had shingles missing. Water had leaked inside the living room. My house wasn't destroyed completely, but it was badly hurt. And I wasn't the only one. Almost every house on the street had some kind of damage. The next day, everyone came out to see what was left. People helped each other, bringing tools, sharing generators, checking on elderly neighbors. There was this strange sense of unity in the chaos. We didn't have power, no internet, no AC, but we were surviving together. I actually felt proud of how our community stood up for each other until the HOA showed up. 3 days later, when we were still cleaning up, a white SUV drove slowly down the street. Two men in polo shirts with clipboards stopped at every house taking pictures. I thought they were insurance assessors at first, maybe helping people file claims. But when one of them stopped at my driveway, I saw the HOA logo on his shirt. He didn't smile. He didn't ask if we were okay. He just looked around, wrote something down and said, "You'll need to replace that fence immediately, and you'll be fined if it's not restored to community standards by next week." I stared at him, thinking he was joking. "Sir," I said, "we just had a hurricane. The fence is gone. Everyone's fence is gone. I don't even have power yet." He shrugged. HOA rules still apply. The hurricane doesn't change that. Then he handed me a paper, a violation notice, and walked away. That moment, I can't even explain how I felt. Angry, helpless, disgusted. I looked around and saw other neighbors getting the same notices. One of them, Mrs. Jenkins, was crying because her roof had caved in, and now she was being fined for debris in her yard. It was insane. A week later, when I finally managed to contact the HOA office, they said the fines would continue until the property was restored to HOA standards. The total? $50,000. For things destroyed by a natural disaster. I couldn't believe it. My insurance company was still processing the claim. I was already drowning in repair costs. And here was the HOA adding more pressure. Instead of helping, they were punishing. Every email I sent was ignored. Every call went to voicemail. When I finally reached someone, they told me the rules were clear and that every homeowner is responsible for maintaining property appearance, regardless of circumstances. That line, regardless of circumstances, burned in my head. I barely had a roof over my kids' heads, and they wanted their neighborhood to look clean again. It wasn't about safety or rebuilding. It was about appearances. And money. The stress started getting to us. My wife couldn't sleep. I was working extra hours, trying to fix what I could myself. Nights were filled with the sound of hammers and generators across the street, everyone trying to rebuild. But no matter what I fixed, the HOA found something else to add to the fine list. Fence not replaced yet. Garage door not matching community color. Dead grass in front yard. How could I water grass when we didn't even have power for 2 weeks? I tried to reason with them, but it was useless. They hid behind policies and paperwork. I felt trapped, in debt, in anger, in that house that no longer felt like home. That's when I decided enough was enough. If they wouldn't show humanity, I'd fight them with the only thing they respected: legal action. What started as a natural disaster was turning into a man-made one, and I wasn't going to let them win. I thought the worst was over when the hurricane passed, but I was wrong. The real storm began after it, the one made of papers, fines, and heartless rules. The HOA wasn't just asking for repairs. They were demanding them immediately. They didn't care that construction companies were fully booked or that most of us were waiting on insurance money. They acted like the hurricane was just an excuse we were using to delay our responsibilities. The letter came one morning, delivered by certified mail. I opened it at the kitchen table, my hands still dirty from cleaning the garage. Inside was a printed document, cold and emotionless. Due to non-compliance with community standards, the homeowner will be assessed a daily fine of $500 until full restoration of property features, fence, lawn, and garage door. Failure to comply will result in legal action. I read it 3 times. My heart sank. That meant $500 every day. At that rate, I'd owe more than $50,000 in just a few months. I couldn't afford it. Not even close. My wife sat across from me, silent. The kids were drawing at the corner of the table, unaware of what that piece of paper meant. I didn't want them to see my frustration, but I slammed my fist on the table anyway. "This is insane," I said. "We just survived a hurricane, and now we're being punished for it." She didn't say anything. She just looked tired. The kind of tired that goes beyond sleep. That night, I barely closed my eyes. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything we'd lost. Not just the fence or the roof, but the peace we once had, the sense of home. Every creak of the house reminded me that something had broken, not just in the walls, but in us too. 2 days later, I went to the HOA office in person. It was a small building near the community entrance, with neat flowers and freshly painted walls. The kind of place that looked untouched by the chaos we were living through. Inside, it smelled like air freshener and paperwork. A woman behind the desk looked up and smiled politely. "How can I help you?" "I'm here about the fine," I said. "My name's Daniel Miller, house number 143. My property was damaged during the hurricane, and..." Before I could finish, she interrupted, flipping through some files. "Yes, Mr. Miller. You've accumulated several violations." "Violations?" I repeated. "My fence was ripped out by a hurricane." She nodded, still reading. "It says here, fence missing, damaged garage door, debris on property, and unmaintained lawn." "Unmaintained lawn?" I almost laughed. "We didn't even have power for 2 weeks." Her smile faded a little, but her voice stayed calm. "The HOA's rules apply to all homeowners equally, sir." I leaned forward. "You're telling me that after a hurricane, when people lost homes, cars, everything, the HOA is still charging fines?" She hesitated just for a second, then said, "Those are the board's decisions, not mine." "You can submit an appeal." "An appeal?" I asked. "How long does that take?" "Usually 6 to 8 weeks. I laughed bitterly. "So I keep getting fined while I wait?" She didn't answer, just looked uncomfortable and said softly, "You'll need to write a formal letter." I walked out shaking with anger. The same neighbors who had helped me clear debris now whispered that they'd gotten fines too. One guy down the street, Rick, said he was charged for temporary tarp roofing. Another family got a violation for having sandbags piled too close to their mailbox. It wasn't just me, it was everyone. But not everyone could fight. Some people paid quietly, afraid of legal trouble or losing their homes. That made me even angrier. So I wrote the letter. I spent an entire night drafting it. Not emotional, just factual. I listed every date, every damage, every photo. I included repair estimates and insurance claim numbers. I even printed pictures of my house before and after the hurricane to show the difference. When I was done, I ended it with one line. Greater than a community that cannot show compassion in times of disaster does not deserve to call itself a community. I mailed it the next morning. Weeks passed. No response. Instead, I got another letter, this time from their attorney. It said that if I didn't pay the outstanding balance of $50,000, they'd place a lien on my home. That meant I could lose the house entirely. I felt my chest tighten as I read the words. A lien. Over a fence and a garage door. Over things nature destroyed. My wife cried when I told her. I felt powerless. I had worked years for that house, and now, because of paperwork and greed, it could all disappear. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. I contacted a local attorney, a man named Robert Evans, who had handled HOA cases before. When I told him what was happening, he sighed and said, "You're not the first, Mr. Miller. After hurricanes, some HOAs try to make up for lost funds by finding homeowners. It's disgusting, but it happens." I asked if we had a chance to win. He smiled faintly. "If you've kept your records, we have a chance. But it's going to be a long fight." And it was. The kind of fight that doesn't just test your patience, it tests your spirit. By the time the case finally reached court, I was running on fumes. Months had passed since Hurricane Irma tore through Florida, but my life still looked like the aftermath of a disaster. My savings were gone, my nerves were shot, and the HOA had turned every attempt to rebuild into another fight. When my lawyer first told me, "We have a case," I didn't believe it. He said, "They violated several homeowner rights, and their fines during a state emergency may not even be legal." That one word, illegal, gave me hope for the first time in months. The courtroom was cold, silent, and too clean, like the people who ran my neighborhood. On one side, I sat with my lawyer, my wife beside me, her hands trembling. On the other, the HOA board members sat stiff in their suits. The same people who once smiled at neighborhood parties now looked at me like I was dirt under their shoes. Their lawyer started with a rehearsed speech about rules, community order, and a homeowner who refused to comply. He said I was negligent and that my property brought down neighborhood value. Hearing that made my blood boil. Negligent? My fence was ripped out by 120-mile-per-hour winds. My garage was crushed by debris, and they called that negligence? When it was our turn, my lawyer stood up and calmly placed a folder on the table. He said, "Your Honor, what the HOA failed to mention is that my client was fined during a declared state of emergency, when local authorities explicitly suspended code enforcement. Yet this HOA continued to issue fines totaling over $50,000. Not only that, but they selectively targeted homeowners who couldn't pay immediately." The room went silent. The HOA president, a man named Robert Hensley, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Then my lawyer pulled out copies of HOA records. "We also discovered something else," he said, turning to the judge. "While my client was being fined for a damaged fence and lawn, certain board members, including Mr. Hensley, received emergency community funds for repairs to their own homes. Those funds were taken from the HOA maintenance reserve. No such offer was made to other residents. You could feel the tension." The judge leaned forward. The HOA lawyer tried to object, but my lawyer had proof. Checks, emails, and signed receipts showing that the president's home repairs had been paid for with HOA money. Robert's face turned red. "That's not true," he said, his voice shaking. But my lawyer opened another folder, this time photos. Photos of the HOA's cleanup truck, parked in front of the president's driveway. The same week residents were being told the budget was exhausted. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. They had been scamming the entire community. When my wife took the stand, the atmosphere shifted completely. She spoke quietly, but her voice carried. We had 2 kids sleeping in one room because the roof leaked. We worked every day after the hurricane to fix what we could. But instead of help, we got letters, fines, threats. My husband couldn't sleep. We thought we'd lose the house. Her voice cracked. Even the judge looked away for a second. For the first time, I saw the HOA board members' confidence crack. They whispered among themselves, avoiding eye contact. The next day of the trial brought even more revelations. Our lawyer presented testimony from other homeowners. People fined for broken mailboxes, fallen trees, even debris left by the storm. Meanwhile, board members' houses were magically exempt. One neighbor said, "When I asked for cleanup assistance, the HOA said there were no funds, but I saw their trucks clearing the president's property first." By the time the final arguments ended, everyone in the courtroom knew the truth. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules. They were abusing power. The judge didn't announce a verdict that day, but the look on her face said everything. Before leaving, the HOA's lawyer quietly approached mine and whispered something. My lawyer turned to me and said, "They want to settle." I didn't respond right away. I looked across the room at the people who had made my family's life miserable, the same people who fined me for damaged grass while their own roofs were being repaired with community money. Now they wanted to walk away quietly. Part of me wanted revenge. The other part just wanted peace. My lawyer advised, "Take it. They'll erase the fines and pay part of your legal fees." After a long silence, I nodded. Fine. But I wanted in writing that they were wrong. We settled the next morning. The HOA dropped the $50,000 fines. I paid a small amount to close the case, a number that didn't matter anymore. I had already lost so much, but I had won something far more important. The truth was out. When we walked out of that courthouse, the air felt lighter, like the storm had finally ended, not just outside, but inside me too. Still, I couldn't forget one thing. A hurricane had destroyed my house, but the HOA had tried to destroy my life. The morning after the settlement, I woke up for the first time in months without a knot in my stomach. No letters taped to my door, no threats in the mail, no fake smiles from board members driving past my house. It was quiet, not the heavy kind of quiet after a storm, but peaceful. For the first time since Hurricane Irma, the silence felt safe. The fight with the HOA had taken everything from me. My savings were drained, my trust was shattered, and I'd aged years in just a few months. But when I looked at my wife and kids sitting at the breakfast table, no fear in their faces, no tears over another letter, I realized something. Peace is worth more than property. We decided that same week we were leaving. I couldn't live another day behind that white picket fence that had turned into a prison wall. The house I once called home now felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by rules, fines, and the memory of people who'd forgotten what humanity meant. Packing was harder than I expected. Every room had a story. The corner of the living room where we'd sat with candles during the hurricane. The garage where I'd stared at the crushed door, wondering how to fix everything. The yard where my kids used to play before the HOA called their toys unsightly. As we packed, neighbors stopped by. Some hugged us, others apologized for not standing up earlier. One man whispered, "You were right to fight them. They scare everyone here." That's when I understood something deeper. Fear is how HOAs survive. They hide behind rules, but what they really use is control. 2 weeks later, the moving truck pulled away, and I watched that neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror. Every fine, every fight, Every sleepless night, shrinking smaller and smaller until it was finally gone. We moved to a small, quiet community outside the city. No HOA, no board, no one to tell me what color my mailbox should be. The first morning there, I woke up early and stepped outside barefoot. The grass wasn't perfect. Some patches were brown, others uneven, but it was mine. I walked to the fence, an old wooden one this time, and just stood there breathing in the morning air. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about anyone watching, judging, or writing me up. Freedom, I realized, doesn't always come with big moments. Sometimes it's small, the sound of your kids laughing too loud, a messy yard, or a car parked slightly crooked in the driveway. Things I used to take for granted, I now cherish like treasures. Still, I couldn't shake the memories completely. There were nights when I'd wake up from dreams of the storm, water rushing under the door, the sound of metal bending, the paper fines taped to my window. It was strange how the hurricane had come and gone in one night, but the damage left by the HOA took years to heal. I tried to understand them, even after everything. Maybe they believed they were doing the right thing, keeping the community beautiful. But beauty without compassion isn't worth anything. A neighborhood isn't made by fences and lawns. It's made by the people inside it, and they had forgotten that. A few months later, I drove back to the old neighborhood just once, not to visit, but to close that chapter completely. The gate guard didn't recognize me at first. When I told him my old address, he looked up and said, "Oh, yeah, they've been through a few board changes since then." HOA's different now, I smiled slightly. Good. Maybe someone finally learned something. When I drove past my old house, it looked almost the same. New fence, new paint, same perfect lawn. But something was missing. That false perfection I once tried so hard to keep. It looked like a postcard now, not a home. I sat there for a moment and then drove away without looking back. That night, sitting on my new porch, I wrote down the words that had been sitting inside me since it all began. A hurricane can destroy your house, but it takes people with no heart to destroy your peace. That's the truth I carry now. Every time someone talks about buying a home in an HOA community, I tell them my story. Not to scare them, but to warn them. Rules are fine, order is fine, but when those things become more important than kindness, they turn into cages. Now, years later, when it rains heavy and the wind starts to howl, my wife still gets nervous. I hold her hand and tell her, it's just a storm, because storms pass. But what the HOA did, that stays with you. Yet I don't live with anger anymore. I live with gratitude for surviving, for fighting back, and for finally finding freedom. Sometimes I walk out to my yard and see the kids' bikes lying on the grass, the dog digging up a corner of the flower bed, my truck parked half on the driveway. And instead of thinking about fines or letters, I smile. Because this, the noise, the mess, the imperfection, this is real life. And I'll never let anyone take that from me again.